microphone before we get started and to give a brief pre-introduction for this afternoon's program. My name is Adam Cordell. I'm the Director of Grants at Virginia Humanities, your State Humanities Council, where our grants program supports projects across the Commonwealth that use history, culture, and storytelling to bring people together and encourage thoughtful engagement. And the grants program is how we came to be involved in this project in particular. And when this project came to us in the form of a proposal for a grant and for partnership, there are a few things that we looked at. We're looking for strong humanities scholarship, clear plans for public engagement, and a commitment to making the work accessible beyond the academy. And this project, led by Dr. Molly Godfrey and Dr. Brooks Hefner at James Madison University, stood out for exactly those reasons. The team combines rigorous research with meaningful community engagement, working with descendants, involving students, and building partnerships with local organizations to ensure that this work reaches a wide audience. Just as important, the project is designed for lasting impact through open access publishing, classroom use, and ongoing public engagement and programming that's going to continue to engage readers and communities across Virginia. For this is precisely the kind of project that matters. It expands the historical record, centers stories that have too often been overlooked, and invites the public into deeper conversations about our shared past. And this is why we invest in this work, to ensure that these stories are not only recovered, but shared widely and meaningfully with the public. And we're happy to have you here to join in this process with us of discovery and learning and conversation, and to learn more about the project itself and this afternoon's program. I'm going to hand it over to Clea Williams, Director of Virginia Center for the Book.
So much for joining us today. I'm so excited about this program. There's going to be some things that I haven't seen before, and I'm super excited. I want to say that this whole program started off because Adam invited me to a symposium at James Madison University, and I and my colleague Jenny, who's with us in the back somewhere, went to this symposium, and we were just blown away. We not only went to the symposium about George A. Newman and his work, we also visited the cemetery where he's buried, and we visited the house where he lived for much of his life. And it was incredibly meaningful. We met his descendant, Ruth Tolliver, who we'll hear from tonight. And we also met Molly Godfrey and Brooks Hefner and talked with them about this amazing project and this voice that's coming to us from the past, and this manuscript that might have been forgotten were it not for the persistence of George A. Newman's descendants. And this is the power of descendancy. This is the power of ancestry come to life right here. And I just want to say I hope that everybody really absorbs this moment today. I'm going to go ahead and just make my little notes that we make before each program, if we go to the Virginia Festival program. This weekend you've heard it before, but the Virginia Festival of the Book is a program of Virginia Humanities, which of course Adam talked about. Our events are free of charge, most of them, but they're not free to produce. So if you'd like to support the Virginia Festival of the Book, there's a QR code on one of those tables in the back, and I encourage you to take a little snapshot. Here's a little money, we'll take it, no amount is too small. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the Virginia Festival of the Book's premier sponsors, Michelle and David Baldacci, who've been supporting this program for many years and who have just an admirable desire to get books in the hands of as many people as possible. We also want to thank the Anne and Jean Worrell Foundation, the Making Energy, and the Joseph and Robert Cornell Memorial Foundation, another longtime sponsor of the Virginia Festival of the Book. We're very grateful. And of course, silence your cell phones, take a look around you, make sure that you are aware of your exits. Of course, if you see something, say something. And I want to thank Stone Soup Books, who are in the back, and they will be selling copies of A Miserable Revenge, annotated by Molly Godfrey and Brooks Hefner. I keep calling him Bruce because I think I'm thinking Holsinger, and that's just not the right person. But they have been not only annotated with additional context about George A. Newman, and additional musings and writings of his, but also they have been signed by Ruth Tolliver, his granddaughter, who cannot be here in person, but we will hear from her today. So we've got a lot of special guests here. We have Molly Godfrey, who's going to start off the afternoon here. She's a professor of English and African American Diaspora Studies at James Madison University, where she serves as the Director of Graduate Studies for the Department of English. She's the author of Brave Humanism, Black Women Rewriting the Human in the Age of Jim Crow. She's the editor of Conversations with Lorraine Hansberry and the co-editor of Neo-Passing, Performing Identity After Jim Crow, and of course the editor of A Miserable Revenge, A Story of Life in Virginia. She has co-directed several Black archival recovery and digital humanities projects, including the Furious Flower Archive, a prototype celebrating STEMs, the story of Lucy F. STEM School, and mapping the Black digital and public humanities. We also have another special guest here today, and we actually have several special guests, because after we hear from Molly, we're going to hear from Ruth Tolliver, the descendant, and then we're going to have another special treat. So Ruth Tolliver is a distinguished educator, community leader, and historian known for her significant contributions to education and local history. A dedicated professional with advanced degrees from Trinity College and coursework from George Washington University, Ruth spent her career teaching literature, composition, and humanities at School Without Walls in Washington, D.C. She was an educational innovator in integrating museum facilities into her curriculum, which she presented her strategies at the National Convention for Teachers of English. As a Cathridge Foundation grant recipient, she studied in England. After her retirement, she continued her role as an innovator and program developer. She was a co-founder of SHARP, an academic resource program for suspended students, and created a parenting program to boost self-worth and family support. She pursued her passion for research and genealogy, and her work focused on the history of Newtown community in Harrisonburg, Virginia, founded by her great-grandfather. She edited and published History of Kelly Street United Brethren in Christ Church, Newtown, Harrisonburg, Virginia, from 1892 to 1906, and authored Keeping Up with Yesterday. I spent an afternoon with Ruth recently. It was not long enough. Ruth and her husband, goes by Tolliver, are just incredible people. I cannot wait until I get to visit them again and spend more time with them, and maybe even visit some historic sites. They are true treasures. I also want to introduce another special guest, Leslie M. Scott Jones, who immediately, when we thought of doing a staged reading, we thought of Leslie, because we knew that she would knock it out of the park and just assemble an amazing cadre of actors and really bring this story to life. She's an African-American Southern woman from Virginia, encompassing all that entails. She completed her bachelor's degree in Africana Studies from LSU in May 2025 and is attending Virginia Commonwealth University for an MFA in theatrical pedagogy. And she has written several plays, novellas, and short stories, which can all be found on Amazon. Bookends. She is a graduate of the Kennedy Center Director Intensive and has been active in the Charlottesville Community Theater for more than 15 years. She served as the Artistic Director of the Charlottesville Players Guild and All Black Theater Company from 2016 to 2024. Recent accomplishments include the Charlottesville Players Guild's 2023 production of all 10 of August Wilson's Century Cycle. Leslie has starred in Fences and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, playing Mom. She directed Chitney, Jim of the Ocean, Radio Golf, and Two Trains Running. She has stage managed The Piano Lesson and produced Joe Turner's Come and Gone by August Wilson. In 2026, she will direct Blood at the Root by Dominique Morisseau at Live Art. So you can see, again, why I immediately thought of Leslie. So, first, we're going to hear from Dr. Molly Godfrey about context and about George Newman's life. And then we're going to hear more intimately about George A. Newman's life by bringing in Ruth Tolliver with, of course, technology to talk about his life and his legacy. And then we're going to hear his work, A Miserable Revenge, A Story of Life in Virginia, come to life by this amazing ensemble of actors here. When they take the stage, they're going to talk to us about, they're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to tell us a little bit about why they chose to spend their time being here today and performing this production. That sound good? All right. Well, let's, Molly, you ready? All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much to Adam. Thank you to Wayla for organizing this event. It is a real honor to be here and to be a part of this incredible program and to share with you all a little about this novel, its place in African American literary history, and our efforts, our team's efforts, to bring it into print. So in 2021, Ruth Tolliver, who you'll be meeting soon, donated her family papers to James Madison University's Special Collections in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Tolliver's grandfather, George A. Newman, was a Black man born with free status in 1855 who became a trailblazing Black educator and civic leader in Harrisonburg in the Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction eras, serving on and off for over 3 decades as principal of 2 of the city's earliest Black schools, serving in leadership positions in the city's most active Black civic organizations, and becoming the first Black person in the region to serve in federal appointments as U.S. storekeeper and later U.S. Marshal. He has left an indelible legacy on the Black community of Harrisonburg and the Shenandoah Valley, remembered in particular for paying poll taxes for local Black men in response to rising disenfranchisement tactics after the end of Reconstruction. His family home, built by his father-in-law, Ambrose Dallard, in 1875, is now known as the Dallard Newman House, with efforts underway to turn it into a local Black history museum. In addition to all of this, Newman was also an aspiring writer, and held within his private papers, carefully guarded by his family for over 100 years, was the 480-page manuscript of an unpublished novel that he wrote between 1876 and 1877, so when he was 21 and 22 years old, and just after he arrived in Harrisonburg. This was also well before the boom in African American writing of the 1890s. Called A Miserable Revenge, A Story of Life in Virginia, the novel is set in the antebellum era in Winchester and Frederick County, Virginia, the very place Newman was apprenticed as a child to white landowners before the Civil War. The novel is a wild ride. It tells the story of a wealthy white mill owner named Joshua Sowers who harbors a dark secret, and a young white man named William Reed who is trying to make his way in the world. Full of murderous plots, bewildering secret identities, a disguised detective, one character's journey to the Wild West, a very Shakespearean poison, and a gruesome, grave-robbing revenge story, the novel resolves with the slow reveal of Sowers' miserable revenge, a revenge that had separated Reed as a child from his true family, and finally with the restoration of Reed to his proper lot in life. In the novel's romantic conclusion, a small few white villains meet their untimely end, but Sowers and another white male villain are surprisingly forgiven. Almost all of the novel's characters are subsequently restored to or joined with new loved ones, and the novel ends with multiple marriages and the entire cast leaving Virginia for a new future in Boston. Though the novel's Black characters play a minor role in the plot, they too go north, and the enslaved characters are all emancipated. As we quickly realized once the manuscript of this fascinating novel was transcribed, it is a remarkable book. First, the novel's composition dates between 1876 and 1877 place it among around a dozen known early African American novels. The earliest of these works were published in the 1850s, most in the North, followed by boom in African American writing in the 1890s, led by writers like Charles Chesnutt, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Francis E.W. Harper, and Polly Hawkins. But we know that other Black writers in other places were producing writing that remained unpublished for a variety of reasons. Indeed, the discovery of Hannah Craft's novel and manuscript, The Bondwoman Narrative, written in the 1850s and published with great fanfare in 2002, is a reminder that the literary productions of 19th century Black writers faced steep obstacles to appearing in print, and that other important Black novels might reside in archives and family papers, to varying degrees unknown by and inaccessible to the public. George Newman's A Miserable Revenge is just such a manuscript, raising fascinating questions about what scholar Elizabeth
Henry calls the hidden but important genealogy of unpublished early Black literature, especially that of the semi-rural South. Additionally, although the novel features several Black characters, including a semi-autobiographical character named George, its primary focus on white characters also makes it the earliest known white life novel, which is a designation scholars use to describe Black authored novels featuring or centering on white protagonists. The Newman's novel, again, preceding other published work in this genre by over a decade. You can see it there. Novels in this genre typically take one of two forms. Either they function as critiques of white society in one way or another, as we see in Dunbar and Cheswick's work, or they function as attempts by Black authors to gain entry into mainstream popular fiction genres, as we see in later 20th century novels by Frank Thurby. Newman's novel is curiously ambiguous in this regard. On the one hand, aligning with popular tropes of mainstream 19th century American romantic fiction and plantation fiction, and on the other, clearly revealing the hidden villainy of the novel's wealthiest white character. Notably, Newman's novel also demonstrates a deep familiarity with a broad range of English and American literary works, including works by William Shakespeare, Lord Byron, Benjamin Franklin, and more. Indeed, many of the novel's central plot lines, secret and mistaken identities, poisoning that looks like death, and a cast of minor characters used primarily for humor, are all borrowed from Shakespeare, something that Newman's novel subtly acknowledges several times. The novel's wild storyline, including its detective character, its use of multiple disguises, its Wild West gold rush plot, also suggests an interesting affinity with mid to late 19th century popular fiction, especially periodical fiction and dime novels, which became popular in the 1860s. You can see here A Mean Revenge, which was published in Frank Leslie's Pleasant Hours in 1869. We think the title may have inspired A Miserable Revenge, and we also know that Newman was reading Frank Leslie's publications because he both sent his letters to his brother. While some early African-American novelists also drew on popular fiction formulas, turn-of-the-century writer Pauline Hopkins is usually seen as the earliest African-American writer of genre fiction. Newman's work, again, precedes hers by 20 years, making A Miserable Revenge a fascinating addition to the African-American literary canon. Bringing this fascinating novel into print began with Ruth Tolliver's decision, upon seeing the manuscript pages beginning to yellow and tear, to donate the papers to Janie's special collections, followed by conversations with us and her about the family's goals for the manuscript. With an initial grant for Virginia Humanities, we hired graduate students Jessalyn Poole and Evan Sizemore to transcribe the manuscript. You can see the verbatim transcript right there. They also helped us research real-life locations in the novel, again set in Winchester, where Newman spent his childhood. All of the locations in the novel are modeled after real places. And they helped us date the manuscript by researching dating the paper, by researching its watermark, and also matching the handwriting of the manuscript to other dated materials in his papers. And you can kind of see how his handwriting aligns with other documents from Noah from the mid-1870s and how much his handwriting has changed by 1900. We used other methods to scrape manuscripts, and happy to talk about that if you have questions. In our second phase of the project, we edited the manuscript for publication, packaging it with supporting materials such as short works by Newman, forward by Ruth, companion scholarly essays, and our own introduction. There, we argue that although A Miserable Revenge focuses primarily on its white cast of characters, it speaks to issues that were of central concern to Black communities in the Reconstruction era, such as the need to reunify families wrongfully torn apart, the hope for reparations for those unjustly denied their due, and the untrustworthiness of white Southerners in positions of power. In this respect, the novel's forgiving conclusion is politically ambiguous. While our contributor, Mark Solin, and we have a couple scholarly essays in the books, our contributor, Mark Solin, reads it as a reflection of Newman's Reconstruction era optimism, condemning revenge as a miserable path and choosing instead forgiveness as offering a better future for white and Black characters. Our contributor, Veronica Watson, instead thinks it as deeply and intentionally unsettling, arguing that as readers are made uncomfortable, perhaps even angry by the outcome of the novel, we are thrust into lived experience and emotional reality of 19th century Black people like Newman on the front lines agitating for social change. Because a community-focused project should, by definition, be accessible to the community, we published in Visual Revenge in an open access digital format with Virginia Humanities funded pen copies available for community groups, schools, local and statewide libraries, and news disciplines. And we also held, as Phil mentioned, a public symposium on the 150th anniversary of Newman's arrival in Harrisonburg that invited contributors, Newman's descendants, students, and the public to celebrate the novel's historic publication. The event included a book signing, tours of the Ballard Newman House, and of the Newtown Cemetery, where Newman is buried, talks by Ruth and our contributing scholars, and a student showcase of the novel's companion website, which includes lesson plans and other materials to encourage future engagement with the novel. For all of us involved, bringing Newman's novel to the world in all of these ways has served as a reminder that Black literature emanates from and belongs in all kinds of unexpected places. And we are thrilled to have this new opportunity to share in this remarkable voice with you today. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Molly Godfrey. That was really great context. So we're going to turn this over. We're going to, our next part of the program, we're going to hear from Ruth Tolliver, who is joining us on Zoom. Hello, Ruth. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you again.
Yes, it is.
Yes, yes. So we first talked at for a radio show with Good Reason, which is produced by Virginia Humanities, and of course anybody here can access that show today. But one of the things we talked about was George A. Newman Sr., who he was as a person. Can you talk about who was George A. Newman Sr.? Who was he to you? And who is he to the legacy of, to history?
Well, basically, he was a kind gentleman, the father of 14. And of those 14, I think I remember at least 10 of them. Anyway, George Newman was involved in lots of different activities. I'm trying to think. He started his teaching career in Linden, Virginia. And it is evidenced in a letter that he wrote to his brother, Samuel, who lived in Washington, D.C. And it is here that the family believes that he was able to get additional schooling other than what he had achieved while working as the term that is often used is he was bound out in a home in Winchester, Virginia. We do believe that he had some formal education in Washington, D.C., but we cannot prove it because seemingly those records have all been lost or destroyed or whatever. He worked in Harrisonburg, Virginia. After leaving Linden, he moved into Harrisonburg, Virginia, where he began his work career as principal of the colored school. And he introduced here a lot of common sense rules and regulations for students to follow. He was, however, very merciful in seeing to that these rules and regulations were followed. And he encouraged teachers to reach their next level of proficiency by participating in a summer session which he had set up. Once a cadre of professionals had been hired, Grandfather Newman created an association for teachers to exchange ideas regarding effective methods of teaching. He pursued community issues, among which was the establishment of Kelly Street United Brethren in Christ Church. The records pertaining to the building of the church, as well as selecting trustees, ministers, establishing a Sunday school, and keeping records of monetary donations, were all kept in minute books, mostly recorded by Grandfather Newman. This church thrived from 1892 through 1906. The minute books give us an excellent picture of Newtown and the role George Newman played in this early community. He had a way of encouraging neighbors to help fund the building and establishment of the church by contributing through lawn parties with their homemade cakes, pies, and ice cream. There were skits and programs written by George Newman. The entries did not always address and record church issues, but reported on goings-on in the small community. Grandfather had a fervent distaste for having a bell installed, is mentioned, although there was a bell tower. You see, Grandfather Newman lived next door to the church, and he didn't want to hear that noise on Sunday morning. He also included in these minute books were records of donations, monetary donations, some as meager as 50 cents, others even a quarter. But with Grandfather's urging, congregants gave whatever amount they could. He also addressed the impact of Robert Gower and his family moving to Minot, North Dakota. Mentioned as well is that he, George Newman, was to go before the city council to get certain restrictions lifted as they related to church activities. These minute books gave me, as well as local historians, an accurate picture of early Newtown and the role that George Newman played in the sustainability of that community. Unfortunately, there came unscrupulous leaders, a court case, and eventually a general loss of interest in the endeavor, thus causing the church to close and to remain closed for many years. Do you want me to go on a little bit longer?
I would love to hear about your memories of your grandfather. Because,
Okay.
yeah, you mentioned you were, how old were you when he passed away?
I was 11 when he passed away, so I knew him relatively well. I remember a great deal about him. My most favorite memory is the way he set up a garden in the back of their home. And every year he put out a garden with carrots and tomatoes and string beans, apples and pears and other general things. And he also always had a space in that garden for my sister and me, so that we would have a place to play when we came during the summer. My sister and I were brought up in Washington, D.C., but every summer we went to Harrisonburg to stay with our grandparents. I remember him walking up Kelly Street in order to have his dinner, which was midday. And I would stand there and wait for him. And his face would light up as he was really happy to see my sister and me every summer. He had a great sense of humor, and whenever we did something that my grandmother fussed about, he would always come to our rescue. He was a loving grandfather, and I have very fond memories of him.
What did it mean to you when you rediscovered his manuscript? How did you feel, and why was it so important for you to preserve, to go through extensive work to find the people who could preserve this?
When my sister had his manuscript, and she had been trying to type it for many years, and it was difficult because his handwriting was difficult to decipher. And she came to me one day and she said, "Here, you take this and type it." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." I had no intentions of trying to type it, but I knew it needed to be preserved. And I kept it for many years. And then one day I looked at it and I thought, this needs a better home, because pages had been torn, there were pages missing, pages had turned yellow. And I thought, what better place than James Madison University? Now, there were two reasons for James Madison University. One was our daughter had graduated from James Madison in 1985. And number two, I had sent his other memorial book, the minute books, to another institution, and I was not happy with the way it had been, the other one had been preserved. And I just kind of thought, JMU has an excellent reputation, and I thought, I'll take his book there along with some other family papers. And that's why I picked James Madison, other than, say, Howard University or some of the Black institutions. I just kind of felt James Madison would take good care of it. And as you can see, they have done an excellent job.
Yes, and it's incredible that you worked so hard to find a home for this and that you put so much thought into finding a home. When we talked before, we talked about the idea that George A. Newman Sr. is your ancestor, but in many ways he's also our ancestor. And in all that entails, what does it mean? What does his legacy mean for all of us?
It means basically that here's a little black man born to free parents, having to carry free papers, and living under the time of Jim Crow, and really struggling to become the person that he was. And it gives all of us incentive to become the person we were meant to become. Because he certainly made a name for himself, although that was not his interest. His main concern was the well-being of his family first and his neighbor second.
That's amazing. There's so much more I'm sure that others want to ask, and we'll have time for question and answer with Ruth. But for now, I'd like to turn this over to hear George A. Newman's Senior's creative light come to life under the direction of Leslie Scott Jones. Thank you so much, Ruth. And if you could stay around, I'd like for the audience to be able to ask you questions, because I'm sure they will have them. But for now, let's go ahead and ask our actors to take the floor. And Ruth, you should be able to watch as they work their magic. Good afternoon. My name is Leslie Scott Jones. I don't know how much you can say I actually directed, but I put this group of actors together to kind of bring this life into this work, and it has been an absolute joy. It was a joy to read the book, and it was actually really hard to choose a portion of it to share with you today, because all of it is so entertaining. So what I'm going to do is I am going to hand this off to our actors. I would like each one of them to introduce themselves and just say a little bit about why they wanted to be part of this process.
Hello, I am Colton Nielsen. I will be playing Joshua Sowers, and I met Leslie through our MFA program at BCU, and she was telling me all about the project, and I said, absolutely. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity, an amazing story, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Mark Williams. I'll be playing Jack. I just love stage reads, and I also love Festival of the Book, so I had to jump right on it.
Hi, my name is Carrington O'Brien, and I am getting my PhD here at UVA, and I study race and performance in the 19th century South, so this project is fascinating to me on very different levels.
Good afternoon, my name is Janina Barber Payne. I'm a postdoctoral fellow and rising scholar in the UVA drama department. Most of my work is in literary adaptations for the stage. Leslie and I are also collaborating on Blood at the Roots, so when I saw the opportunity come through, I said yes. I will be reading the role of narrator, Kate's mother, and Aunt Sally.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cadessa Davis. I will be playing Kate and Mrs. King, and I just want to do this because I always enjoy learning new things, and this was something new to learn about the history of Virginia and a writer in Virginia. Of course, my mic didn't work. I'm Ruda, and I'm Ruda and the grandma of the group, and whoops, sorry. And I will be playing Wilson Reed, the antagonist today. And I'm just love doing this, and I saw an announcement about this, and I said, can you use an elderly old woman to read? And she said, would you play a man? And I said, sure, why not? So here I am.
Well, it's 5 o'clock, and I don't hear the mill going. I did not see Albert at all last night. Perhaps he stayed in town. However, I'll go down to the mill and see what is up. Let's see.
He added,
This is the 2nd day of April.
our friends may imagine who the he was. It was Mr. Joshua Sowers, owner of the Brookland Mills. He was so used to hearing the mill running that he would quickly, in the midnight if the mill stopped, he would quickly perceive that it had. He went softly downstairs and on down to the mill. As he reached the door of the mill, he met his wagoner. In our first chapter, we did not tell our readers that Wilson Reed was employed as Wagner for Mr. Sowers, but such was the case.
Good morning, Wilson.
Said Mr. Sowers.
Have you seen anything of Mr. King this morning?
No, sir, I have not.
Said Wilson doggedly. It seemed that Wilson Reed had a secret power over Mr. Sowers. After Mr. Sowers had started the mill and got his breakfast, he started off to Winchester. While he is on his way to Winchester, we will avail ourselves of the opportunity of describing him and his family. He was a man of very muscular physique. He was about 60 years of age. His hair was an iron gray. He was also dressed in his regular miller's shirt. His wife was near the same age and was a fine, robust woman for her age. He had a daughter, an only child, a girl who had long since passed sweet 16, yet she was very beautiful. She had blue eyes, and her hair formed a striking contrast with her eyes, for her hair was a dark brown. When Mr. Sowers reached town, he went to Albert King's home and inquired of his mother if she had seen Albert anywhere, or if he had stayed there all night and was indisposed.
No, sir.
Said Mrs. King.
He is not here, nor did he stay all night. He was here yesterday about 10 o'clock. He put some clothes in his valise, and he said he would take them to the mill with him. I hope he has not met with any bad luck.
Mr. Sowers returned home in a very bad humor. When he reached his gate, he called his faithful servant Jack to put his horse away. Jack came out of the barn looking very pale for a colored man.
Jack, why don't you hurry up? You've been drunk again, and I'll not put up with it any longer. And as soon as you put that horse away, come to me and I will settle with you.
Jack put the horse in the stable, and he didn't seem to be in a hurry to go to his master. When he at last started for the house, he said,
Yes, I am determined to argufy this case with old Master Joshua. The only way to get out of this scrape is to argufy this case with him.
So he walked to where his master was standing, cowhide in hand to whip him. Jack stopped a little out of the reach of the cowhide and began to argufy the case, as he called it.
Now, Master Joshua, now looky here. You ain't gonna whoop poor old Jack, are you? I've been a good son. Only I does drink a little too much sometimes.
Mr. Sowers began to grow restive, and he said,
Now, Jack, I want none of your trying to beg off. You have done that too often. Now, I'm not going to think it over or talk it over with you, but I am going to give you a genteel cowhide. So come closer so I can hit you.
Mr. Sowers waited for Jack to come closer, but Jack wasn't coming any closer, not fast.
Now, Mr. Joshua, just let me and you occupy this case just for the sake of occupication. You has known me a long while, and I've known you a long while. You are Master Joshua Sowers, and I ain't nothing but old Jack. But we must occupy this case.
Here, Jack stopped and looked in his master's face to see if his words had any influence on his master. He had not long to wait, for his master was in a bad humor.
Jack, I am tired of this foolishness, so come here and let me whip you. Or shall I have you whipped at the whipping post in Winchester?
Now, Jack did not like to hear of the whipping post, so he was more determined than ever to occupy his case. So he stood still and said,
Now, Mr. Joshua, let me occupy just this one case. Come on down here and be old Jack, and let me stand in the gate as Master Joshua Sowers, just for a little while, until I show you what I mean by occupication.
Sowers began to get more impatient. But in order to see what old Jack was up to, he accordingly changed places with old Jack, giving Jack the cowhide. So Jack took his place in the gate as Master Sowers and began talking to his master in this style.
Now come in here, you old nigger, you. I ought to trash the very skin off you, but you've been a good son. Only the fault of drinking too much. You think I'm going to whoop you after you've been with me so long and such a faithful servant? No, I see you damned first. Now come on in here, you rotten motor Aaron, and behave yourself in the future. And I'm not with you, you yellow rascal. You ain't even yellow. You are black.
Sowers was so completely amused at his old servant's way of arguing the case that he had a long and hearty laugh. And he never gave himself any more trouble about old Jack. Old Jack was incorrigible. Now, while old Jack and his master were arguing, another scene was being enacted in the kitchen. Kate Barton was in the kitchen. Now, she had been told to stay away from there, but a good many times, but she did not heed the order. So, as it always was in Virginia, those who did not heed the law must be punished by the law. And Aunt Sally was arguing the case with Kate. She was saying, now Kate, you're coming here again and again, and you know that master and missus don't want you here. We them don't want any of us want you here. We them aristocratic gentlemen and ladies. We them don't want any poor trash to pride around here. Me. And Aunt Sally walked proudly across the floor to the stove to look at her roast beef and pot of cabbage. About this time, a young Miss Sowers came in, and Kate ran to meet her and bid her good morning. But she was met with a cold reception from Miss Mattie Sowers. Now, shortly after this, she returned home. As she slowly sauntered along, she said in a low voice, scarcely above a whisper,
I will have my revenge.
now whom would she have been contemplating a revenge on? We shall see. It was dinner time, and Wilson Reed proceeded to the fine house of Mr. Sowers to get his dinner. While he always boarded at old Sowers' house was more than anyone could find out. But it made no difference whether there was company or no company at the house. He always boarded there. As he came out from his dinner, his employer came out too, and they both went to the mill together. As they neared the mill, Sowers began talking of some game he was playing.
Wills,
Said Sowers.
I hope you have never breathed a word about that. Well, you know what. I don't like to speak it. For rocks have ears sometimes if you have.
If I have, what are you going to do about it?
Fired up Wills.
I want you to recollect, Josh Sowers, that it was I. If I was not to be heard of, or was to be missing, it would not take long for you to bring you to justice.
Now, after a short pause, he added,
I have got papers in the hands of certain persons that would bring you down lower than your old dog, Josh Sowers, and I have been playing the deep game for you. And don't you threaten me, or by heavens, I shall tell all.
Joshua Sowers, upon hearing this, turned as white as a ghost and trembled like a leaf.
My goodness, Wills, don't speak so loud. I didn't threaten you, nor did I think of such a thing.
And he tried to smile, but it was a very faint smile.
I was with you when you administered that dose.
Hush, Wills, or I'll shoot you in your tracks.
And Mr. Sowers was trying hard to conceal his rage, but Wills Reed was very cool.
Oh, now, if my other unfinished sentence scared you so much, how will this one act? I say, how will this sentence act? I went with you to the graveyard and helped.
At this juncture, Joshua Sowers nearly fainted, but by a power almost superhuman, he controlled himself and fell on his knees to Wilson and asked him to say no more.
Oh, Wilson, I beg you to hush. Please have mercy. Don't expose me to the world. Have mercy. Have mercy.
Now here he broke down with sobs, but Wills Reed took it all coolly. Sowers.
Come on, get up, Joshua. I'll say no more. I see you comprehend fully how I've got you in my power. I was only gonna say I helped you to...
Before he could finish his sentence, Joshua Sowers fell as if dead. For glancing up through the bushes before him, he saw a female figure crouching down as if listening at him and Wills Reed. Wills bathed his head in cold water and soon brought him around. They soon reached the mill after this. Joshua Sowers was ill at ease. When Kate reached home, her mother had dinner already ready. When they were seated at the table, her mother asked in her usual way, "Kate, has Albert King returned yet, or has he been heard of?"
No, indeed, Mother. He ain't come back yet, and Mr. Sowers was on his very bad humor about it. Him and Jack had a time of it. Oh, but he didn't whip Jack.
Answered Kate. But she didn't tell her mother what a time she and Aunt Sally had had. A short distance above their house was a ledge of rocks. On this ledge was a lot of bushes, and below this ledge was a road leading to the mill, as if there was a path on the ledge beyond the bushes. Now Kate thought she would take this path, and as she proceeded along, she heard voices. She recognized one as Wills Reed's. The other was so plaintive she didn't know it, and thinking 'twas no harm to eavesdrop, as she had done many times before, she crouched in the bushes and listened. But she could not catch a word, as there was a breeze blowing and it wafted the voices onward. She finally got up and started on towards Mr. Sowers' house, and as we have neglected Mrs. and Mrs. Sowers so long, we will turn our attention to them as Kate enters. When Kate entered Mrs. Sowers' kitchen, she was received as coolly as ever. But she wouldn't be thwarted in her plans. So she put on her blandest smile and commenced her prayer.
Why, good evening, Mrs. Sowers. How are you, and how did you enjoy yourself yesterday? Oh, and how was all the people at Spout Springs?
There was no telling how long she would have run on thus if she had not been interrupted by Joe running in and telling her that a young lady from the vicinity of Greenwood wanted her to spend the evening with her at this lady's home. So she went with the lady. After she had been gone for about an hour, Aunt Sally began to relieve her brain of so much weight. So she told Mrs. Sowers of her treatment to Kate in the morning. Finally, supper time came, and after supper they all went into the parlor to sit a while. About 9 o'clock, they all went to bed. Miss Mattie went to her room and sat a while to read. She didn't have a chambermaid, so she undressed and went to bed. She soon fell asleep, little thinking that any intended assassin was lurking in her room. She had a strange dream. She dreamed someone was standing over her, a gleam of deadly hate in their eyes, and a knife in hand, ready to plunge it deep in her heart. She could not move, neither hand nor foot. She tried to speak, to beg for her life or scream and arouse the house, but all was of no avail for some length of time. Finally, she succeeded in moving and opened her eyes, and for some time, she was speechless with terror. To wake out of a dream, a horrible dream, only to have it verified. To wake, only to realize the seeming horror in her dream. For there, standing over her bed, was a person, masked and raising a knife to deal her a deadly blow. She raised up, gave one deafening scream, and fell unconscious on her bed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed listening to George Newman's work. It was an absolute pleasure for us to work on this project. Did you have any questions for us?
Is this actually written as a play?
No. And I did not make very many changes to the text in order to adapt it because his narration is so lively and fun. I tried not to cut any of it.
I love the figure of speech. Are you fine? Any other interesting figures of speech?
Throughout the book, yes, there are. And they are absolutely representative of colloquial language. I'm sure, yes, for the Black community, but also specific to Harrisonburg.
Any other examples?
Ooh, it's been minutes since I've read the book. Nothing off the top of my head, but yeah, it's full of lovely colloquial language.
So who would have been his audience at the time? Was he writing for other people in his community? Was he writing for folks who had been free Black people at the time? Who was he thinking would read his work?
We actually have there's no evidence that he ever tried to publish the novel. And we have to remember he was about 20 years old when he wrote it. It's clear, though, that he's trying to write himself into what were popular fiction genres of the time. Some of that colloquial language that you noticed was very common in 19th century American literature. So the kind of plantation fiction genre, for example, that's the kind of language you would hear in that genre. And so it seems like he's trying to imagine himself as having a general American audience. But the obstacles for Black authors in this period between the Civil War and the kind of 1890s boom in Black writing, there are very few pathways for Black writers in those decades to get published. And we have no evidence that he ever tried to publish the novel. So in some ways, he's writing for all of us. In other ways, he was writing for himself. For the most part, it was a single page here and there, and so the gaps were not too troubling. We were able to use brackets in the text to indicate when a page is missing. There's only two sections where it's really noticeable. One in which kind of new character is introduced. When Sowers decides they want to move to Boston, he's going to sell the mill. And so a new character is introduced at that point, and we had to provide some narrative description of what we think happened in that missing period, in those missing pages. The most striking and sort of sad loss is the last page, which I showed up here, is torn. You can tell, right, where, and it's a happy ending. So you can imagine, we actually have an interactive feature on the website if you want to play around and try to fill in the blanks and write your own ending for the novel. So that's how we've tried to address it. But there are some pages missing, and in particular, George, the sort of character who we think is kind of modeled off of George Newman, is mentioned on those final pages, but the description of where he ends up is lost. And so that was a sad thing, but something that we tried to address with the interactive material on the website. Absolutely. And very, very well and widely read. There are so many literary references in the text. So many, so many, Shakespeare and Byron, but also just so many genres that he was drawing on and pulling on and using quite humorously.
I honestly think that if we took this to the next iteration and actually did fully adapt it into a play, it would absolutely be a melodrama. Like, absolutely, this is a melodrama.
And I think that absolutely should be a project too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and there's also questions for Ruth, if anyone has any. Did you have one? You?
Not at the moment.
Let's do it.
Question for Ruth. Did you all think of
She can't
yourselves?
hear you unless you have a microphone.
I can repeat it? Okay. I can repeat it.
Did you all think of yourselves as a literary family? Were there stories in your family about you having written this book?
Ruth, did you think of yourselves as a literary family?
Were there stories about this book?
Were there stories about the novel?
In the family?
There were stories about the novel, yes. There were a few stories about it. It was my Aunt Ruby who kept the novel for many, many, many years. We knew it existed. What it was all about, we had no idea. And remember, I was 11 when he died, so this novel didn't really mean an awful lot to me then.
One more question for you, Ruth. 1 second.
Is there a tradition of teachers and writers in your family now?
Is there a tradition of teachers and writers in your family now?
Yes, there are lots of teachers, high school, elementary principals, yes, lots of us.
And musicians too, correct? Aren't there musical papers in the collection that you donated?
Yes. My cousin Wendell, his mother was Ruby Newman Temple, the historian of the family. He used his GI Bill and was able to get a master's degree in musical composition, I do believe, from Oberlin, was Oberlin College at that time. And there's a family of singers. I think it was Uncle Harry who had a little band that he played for functions in and around Harrisonburg.
But it's also not necessarily uncommon, especially in Black families in the rural South, for there to be a lot of teachers. Teachers, nurses in the family, because post-emancipation and post-Reconstruction, those were the jobs that Black people could get. So those were the careers that were available to us. And it has continued in Black families. In my family right now, there are 5 nurses and 3 elementary school teachers, and they're all my cousins.
Yes. What is the miserable revenge? You have to read the book and find out. What's fantastic about the narrator is that from the first page, he's saying, you know, just you wait. You're never going to believe it. It's so bad. Yeah. So. So we know that he was bound out as a child to a white family in Winchester and received some education in exchange for that labor. And then Ruth believes that he got some education in Washington, D.C. post-Civil War before coming to Harrisonburg. So in that kind of 10-year gap before he came to Harrisonburg. But we don't have any records of that period, and that's something that we're going to continue to work on. Ruth, did you want to add to that?
My husband and I both have searched all kinds of records in the district to try to determine where he went to school. There were several schools for young African Americans during his early life, but we can find no records.
And there was, so when he came to Harrisonburg as principal, there were periods when he stepped aside from that role, and I think it was because he didn't have as high a certification as principal, is that right, Ruth? As
This
others?
is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in actuality, unfortunately, it was a black woman in Harrisonburg who complained vehemently that he should be removed from the principalship because he had no degree. And it was after that, it was around 1906, I do believe, that he was forcefully removed from that position. And that's when he opened up his notary public business and his insurance business. And when I knew him, he was working in insurance and the notary public. Sometimes when you look at deeds in the deed office, you will see that he has signed off on many of the deeds.
One more question. So the question is, what was he doing at the time that he wrote the novel? He came to Harrisonburg in 1875 to serve as principal. So starts writing the novel in 1876 to 1877 while he's working as principal. We also know that he was very involved in local politics in that period. He actually got written in an election that he didn't run for. So he was pretty busy and then very active in the church as well, right, Ruth?
Yes, he was very active in the church, and it's interesting to note that there were one or two hymns. When he heard them, he would just stand up and scream or yell, whichever you have. But I do remember one Sunday morning, I was in church, and I always sat behind my Aunt Ruby. She played the organ, and I always sat there. And I went to sleep because most people couldn't see me behind the organist. I went to sleep and I was awakened with my grandfather yelling like the spirit had hit him. And I said to my Aunt Ruby, "What's wrong with him?" And she said, "The Holy Spirit has hit him, and that's his way of showing it." So I accepted that as, as fine. At an early age, whatever Aunt Ruby said to me was fine. So he was quite a religious man. And he is the person who christened me. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, christened, but we Methodists use that term. And I must have been about 4 or 5. When he christened me, and that caused a great bond between the two of us, if I remember correctly.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you to everybody, these wonderful performances. Just really amazing. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is a really special day, and I hope that everybody carries a piece of this with them for a long time, because again, this is all about legacy and all about what George A. Newman Sr. left us, and we're grateful for that. Oh, and also I'll add books. Get his book. Yeah, you gotta find out what Miserable Revenge is. Thank you all so much.